is field research in language studies. So that is what we are going to cover. So the very first element is to be able to understand the concept research that you are already familiar with. What is research? Problem solving activity, gap filling activity,
in which we systematically fill the gap.
in which we systematically identify the gap and fill it. So that is done. So you know what niche is?
Unexplored area.
Unexplored area that needs your attention. Yeah? And you know how to identify it. How do we identify it? Through observation,
Critique, finding and changing the context.
Literature review, and literature review we said is applicable to all other areas as well. Next, research questions, RQs.
Problem statements.
Problem statement, or they do what? Functionalize.
Yes. Practical form of.
Yes, the practical form of niche. So once you identify niche, in its raw form it's not workable.
Yes.
So what you do is you transform your niche into the research questions that you can later on work upon in order to contribute to the existing body of knowledge. So research is creation of new knowledge as well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So creation of new knowledge happens when you identify a gap,
Yes, sir.
you functionalize it, and then you follow certain procedures to execute research. Okay, so the next thing after identification of research questions is literature review.
Yes.
Although we said that literature review is that element,
That is necessary.
yes. So literature review is that element that you need to rely on from the very beginning,
Till then.
from the inception of the idea till the conclusion.
Yes, sir.
So you need literature review. What is literature review?
Survey of existing body of knowledge.
Survey of existing body of knowledge, in which you provide overview of the work that is already available. So already available knowledge that is relevant to your topic. That is relevant to your topic. And what sources we rely on?
Books and
journals. So there is a lot available, but primarily we focus on
Books and journals.
books and journals. And then we have to do what?
Thematic.
Compare and contrast.
Source, and then acknowledge.
Citation and reference.
So we need to acknowledge the source. So how do we acknowledge the source?
Citation.
Citation and reference. So by providing citation and reference, we acknowledge the source.
Yes, sir.
And how do we get to know about the conventions of acknowledgement of source?
APML.
So there are different frameworks available that we rely on in order to provide the form of references and citation.
Yes.
So APA has its own conventions, MLA has its own conventions, Harvard, Chicago, and there are many other frameworks available as well. So you can download APA 7th edition PDF form document and then follow different conventions that are available there for books, for journals, for even newspaper articles, pamphlets. And then there is another aspect that in literature review you do either you quote or you paraphrase the information. So these are the two ways that we rely on in order to incorporate information in our work. Either we quote or we paraphrase. Okay, so I am not going into the detail of all these things since you are familiar with them already. So the next stage is, after literature review, we move towards methodology. Methodology. So this is the stage where you talk about how you are going to execute research. What are the steps that you are going to follow? So methodology is discipline specific. Methodology is what? Discipline specific. So if it's literature, you will follow a different method to execute research. If it's language or linguistics, then you will follow another way to execute research. So methodology, since you are students of language and literature we have already covered. Now we are going to talk about linguistics or language. Okay, so literature is mainly desk research.
Yes, sir.
So you do not go in the field and interact with the audience and collect data. Whereas in linguistics or language studies, there you have to go in the field. So that is why we say it's a field research where there is involvement of human participants. So you go and interact with them and collect data and analyze it. Not all linguistic research or language related research is field research. It can be desk research as well. But in social sciences, since we consider you as social scientists, so you should be having the ability to take up any area and investigate it. Your job is not limited to language and literature. So being social scientists, you must know how generally we do field research. So some of those aspects that are vital for executing a project, I'm going to share with you. Rest remains the same. Research questions, identification of niche, literature review are those elements that will remain the same, be it field research or desk research. It does not vary. But at the stage of methodology, you execute research, field research differently than desk research. So what are those differences? Major simplified version of those things. Okay? So the crux or simplified version, so that you are, although majority of you will be doing desk research, literary analysis, isms and all. But since you have studied linguistics and language studies, so I believe a quick overview or a abridged version of how to do field research is important. So the very first element is population. Population. So in this field research, there is no text available. You have to interact with humans and collect data. So entire set of possible participants is called your population. So population means from whom are you going to collect data. So the example is, for example, you want to see the teaching quality in the schools of Jhang, for example, if that is your topic. So what is your population? No, teaching quality of, So probably you will go and take opinions of students regarding to what extent they are satisfied with teachers. So do you think students of Gojra will be relevant?
No.
Why not?
Because the topic is about
So your population is students of Jhang. So students of Gojra might be the population for another researcher, but not for Jhang, you guys. Okay. So and then after population, there is a concept of sample. It is not possible for you to go individually and collect opinion of all students in China. I mean, it's next to impossible that you will go and take opinion from every single individual. So what we do is we select a certain number of participants. So sample is what? Those selected participants. Population is entire set of participants. Whereas sample is selected number of participants that actually take part in your research. So the ones who are actually take part in your research. Say for example there are 700 of students in Jhang that are studying in schools. So those may be 150 students that you select to take opinion from will be your sample size. Now how would I move from 700 to 150? That is the question. That how to move from 700 to 150. Whom to select? Who are those students that I should be contacting and taking their opinions? How will I do this? There are different ways. So we call them sampling techniques. So there are variety of sampling techniques available. Random sampling, purposive sampling and many others. We aren't going to go into the details of those techniques. I am just going to share with you one sample that is important to form. Whatever strategies you may use, whatever technique of sampling you may use, your sample must have one characteristic, one key characteristic. That is I'm going to share right now. It should be what? Representative. Your sample should be representative sample. A representative sample is what? That represents your entire population. Entire population. For example, say for instance, you are my population. This class is my population. So say you are 60. Yeah? So, and I want to take 10 out of you to take, for example, an opinion on co-education. So I want to take the opinion of this class on what do they think about co-education on campus. So it's not possible for me to ask every single individual what do they think about co-education. So what I would do is probably I'll select the ones who come from villages and the ones who come from cities. The ones who are relatively stronger economic background and the ones who not so strong the economic background. So what are these things? Economy, belonging, variables. These are the variables that we rely on in order to move from population to sample. So since you are all girls, so if it was a mixed classroom, I would say gender as a variable as well. What is the opinion of male students and what is the opinion of female students? Also, since majority of you are Muslims, so if it was a multi-religious group, so religion will be one variable. If it was a multi-religious classroom, and since majority of you are Punjabis, so I'm not even going to focus on your ethnicity. So otherwise ethnicity might have been another variable. Are you getting my point?
Yes.
So these are different variables. So what I would do is I'll assign values to these variables. So 5 Punjabi, 5 Sindhi, 5 Balochi, 10 male, 10 female. So, or say if I scale it up, if I want to know the opinion of entire student body of University of Jhang on co-education. So, would it be okay to just take opinion of students of English?
No.
Why not? University of Jhang. So the students of the opinion of students of English might not be representative of the entire population of University of Jhang. So what I need to do is I need to select probably 10 students from all 21 disciplines and then collectively take, individually or collectively, whatever method I use. So the idea is representative sample is that sample that has the characteristics of
Population.
yes. So that has characteristics of, or it represents your population. You take into consideration all those variables. सिर्फ रिकॉर्डिंग पे रिलाई नहीं करना, ये शायद ना मिले तो प्लीज टेक नोट्स. So representative sample कौन सा sample होता है? That has key characteristics of entire population, or the other way around, you can say, in which you take into consideration all those variables that can affect your findings. So say for example, if I neglect gender, so it will be just the opinion of male students. So can you say just the students of male student opinion of male students is the opinion of entire student body?
No.
Or the other way around of the female students, the entire? No. So gender is one variable. So the selection of variable depends upon what your RQs are. In certain RQs, gender might not be a variable. Yeah? So there might be research questions where gender is not relevant. There might be, so depending upon what you want to investigate, accordingly you select your variables. And then you make those variables representative. So you take into consideration, for example, your major. So English major ke bacche, maths, physics, chemistry, biology and all. So if it is a survey of entire student body, so you must include them. So representative sample क्या हो गया? एक ऐसा sample जो आपकी पूरी की पूरी population को represent करता है, क्योंकि उसमें वो सारे elements आपने शामिल कर लिए हैं जो कि आपकी findings पर आपकी findings में change ला सकते थे अगर आप उनको शामिल ना करते. तो आपने एक inclusive sample बनाया. Representative sample is what sort of sample? Inclusive क्या होता है? जो जिसमें सारे elements को आपने शामिल कर लिया. Is that quite clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's move on. So you go and collect data of whatever your RQs are. So moving onwards, there is one thing that you need to rely on in order to move forward. That is your research tool. क्या है? Research tool. So if you do not have a research tool, you won't be able to collect data. So research tool. So research tool is basically a tool that you use in order to
collect data.
You collect data through a research tool. There are quite a few research tools available depending upon methodology. So basically your research tool is your afternoon class. Class के बाद है. So this is your method. So data collection tool comes in, whereas methodology is
Research tool. Have steps.
philosophy, the ideology, the framework. Remember?
Yes, sir.
Literary research में भी हमने यही कहा था ना.
Yes.
So methodology is your Framework. So your framework will determine your method, and your method will determine your research tool. But generally, two tools that I'm going to share with you are heavily relied upon in social sciences and humanities. Two tools. What are they?
Questionnaire
Yes,
and
questionnaire and
interviews.
interviews. Number one, questionnaires. Number two,
Interviews.
interviews. So questionnaires and interviews are two tools that research tools that you rely on in order to collect data. Okay. Again, we aren't in a position to now go into the details of how do you design questionnaires, but prominent salient features of questionnaires. Okay. So number one, there are some open-ended questions and some close-ended. The difference between open-ended and close-ended is, in open-ended you do not provide options. So you just say, for example, define education. Whereas when you say close-ended, so you say, what is your opinion regarding education? Please select one option. So yeah, so
इसमें option नहीं है.
no, even within a questionnaire there is an option that you can give a statement and ask the audience to write or give their response on. So every questionnaire has a mix of open-ended and close-ended questionnaires. So basically the purpose of close-ended question is to quantify, to be able to count the number of instances. So for example, what is the percentage of people who think education is personality development? So because if you distribute the questionnaire to 200 students, by the end of your research you will be in a position to calculate how many responses did you get against any of the options. Whereas in open-ended you see the trends. So you get their opinion and then you see the emerging trends while you analyze data, because there are no numbers and the responses of the participants will be so diverse that you won't be in a position to quantify them. I'll very briefly at the end touch upon analysis as well. Right now our focus is on collection. Any question on collection? No? So I said that after determining that what your framework is, accordingly you select a method. Your method leads you towards selection of a research tool. Two research tools that we heavily rely upon are questionnaires and interviews. So questionnaire is those documents you must have come across. So teacher evaluation forms भी आपके पास कभी आए होंगे. So that is questionnaire basically. So जिसमें आप हमें बड़ा that you form based upon your RQs. So questionnaires, there is a lot, so I have to skip a few things. So basically each questionnaire has QIs, questionnaire items. So each questionnaire has QIs. So please do not confuse RQs with QIs. RQs are your research questions and they are probably objectives of your research, whereas QIs are extensions of your RQs. So for example, if you have 3 RQs, so probably you might have 20 questionnaire
QIs.
QIs, questionnaire items. So you might want to address different aspects of those RQs and direct them towards your audience. So for example, if RQ is to what extent, I'm giving you an example, to what extent students are satisfied with teaching quality in the schools of Jhang. This is what RQ. So I did not address anyone, did I?
No.
So what I said, listen again. To what extent students are satisfied with teaching quality in the schools of Jhang. Now I'm going to give you a QI of this. For example, number one, QI for example. Are you satisfied with the subject knowledge of your teacher? And then you give the option yes, no, no opinion. And they have to tick one.
Yes.
So this is a close-ended questionnaire item that I derived out of research question. In this one, in QI, I am addressing someone.
Yes.
Addressing whom?
Sample.
Sample. Addressing your sample. Remember that it is you distribute your questionnaire to representative sample. You distribute your questionnaire to your representative sample. That sample that you have selected out of your entire set of participants. Entire set of
Population.
possible participants or population, yes. So questionnaire has different QIs. QIs are derived out of RQs so that you can collect data. And the structure of questionnaire is one important element, that how you design. So, I mean, again, we can't go into the detail, but two major elements are content and structure. Content and structure. Content means what to ask. What are you going to ask your participants? उनसे क्या पूछना है क्वेश्चनर में? So that is content. जैसे मैंने अभी पूछा on teaching quality. So how do I get to know about the content? How do I get to know about the content of a
Research
question?
questions.
Research questions. Research questions. And even your literature view helps you. Literature view helps you what to ask. Because when you read on a topic, you get to know the terminologies, you get to, empower yourself with new ideas that are related. So rather than, using overly simplistic expressions in your questionnaire, once you read more, you have very pertinent expressions to be incorporated in your
QIs.
QIs, yes, in your questionnaire items. So you will have refined QIs if you read more. You will have informed QIs, informed opinions to be inquired upon from your representative sample. Clear? The other element is structure that I have already discussed. Some of them are close-ended, some of them are open-ended. And then there is the element of scale. What scale are you going to use? Agree, disagree, yes, no, pick one, or there are quite a few ways in terms of structuring your questionnaire items. So usually it is advised that you rely on multiple ways to structure your QIs so that participants are double checked on how valid their responses are. Because sometimes if you just give them yes, no, they randomly yes, no, no. So there are a few techniques that we use to get valid responses. So if you do not have valid responses through your research tool, then there is no point of doing research. Making sense?
Yes.
क्या कहा? बस सुनी जा रहे? रिकॉर्ड हो रहा है भाई, इतना ही काफी। वैलिड रिस्पॉन्सेज चाहिए हैं इन ऑर्डर टू द वेरी पर्पस ऑफ।
सर इसका मतलब ये है कि हमें प्रॉपर पता हो कि 50% सेटिस्फाई है, 50% नहीं है, इनमें 20% जो है वो मेनली सेटिस्फाइड है। जो आज
वो तो एनालिसिस की स्टेज पे जाएगा। अभी मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि हमें वी नीड रिस्पॉन्सेज दैट आर वैलिड। We do not want anyone to pick up a questionnaire and then even without reading statement fill it. Say for example, in the very first question I ask, are you satisfied with the content that is delivered in the classroom by the teacher? और नीचे option मैंने yes, no और no opinion दिया हुआ। ये था question number 1, questionnaire item number 1, and then in the questionnaire item number 13 I ask, my teacher is very knowledgeable और नीचे ऑप्शन दिया हुआ है agree, disagree और no opinion। पहले वाले में आपने क्या कहा था?
No.
No, कि my teacher does not have command on the subject। अब आप कह रहे हैं
Yes.
agree। So this is the point।
It depends on the structure to grab the attention.
Yeah, and just randomly put in a few questions that will make you realize कि उसने पढ़ के किया या ऐसे टिक 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 कर दिया, क्रॉस क्रॉस क्रॉस। सो इस तरह के भी उसमें आप चीज़ें रखें। फिर जब इस तरह से अगर अब देखें, ये तो this is contradiction। In one question he or she was saying that they are happy with the teaching quality and the subject knowledge, और उसी को आपने rephrase करके पूछा तो the answer came no, so you will cancel out।
Yes.
So this is invalid response। So वो पूरे का पूरा questionnaire या at least those items you will not include because yeah, it is against the very essence of collection of data। Clear?
Yes.
Should we move on?
Yes.
So questionnaire के बारे में बस कुछ इतनी सी ही चीज़ें। Interviews, again I mean it's an entire topic। It's open-ended। In interviews you are able to investigate a phenomenon in relatively more detail। It is less structured। The same questions that you asked in your questionnaire can be incorporated in interviews as well। But in interviews the idea is that the answer of one response leads you towards another question। So you are able to tailor your questions according to the responses that you get from a participant। So certain RQs are more suited for interviews, whereas if you want to quantify your data, or I mean it's a quantitative research, generally surveys or questionnaires are preferred। Clear?
Yes.
And then there are mixed method research is available as well, where you rely on both questionnaire as well as
Interviews.
उसको क्या कहते हैं?
Mixed method research।
Mixed method research। Mixed method। In mixed method research you rely on both quantification of data whereas as well as qualitative analysis। So qualitative analysis is usually inductive in nature, the very concept that we discussed in the very beginning, if you remember, inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning। So in inductive there is no hypothesis, so you do not assume things beforehand, you let the data decide in what direction your analysis would proceed, whereas in deductive research there is somewhat
Hypothesis.
a preconceived understanding of the solution already with you that may get falsified or may be proved right। So that is deductive reasoning or deductive way of doing things। Okay, so having done that, now let's move towards the next stage। So first हमने field research का कौन सा aspect cover किया? Methodology. Then we move towards
Method.
collection of data. Methodology. These are two major chapters of research report in field research. Yes, in field research. So quantification is done mainly, and then you rely on questionnaires. Now once the quantification is done, I mean to be able to अच्छा आज का मेजर मकसद पता क्या है कि आपको एटलीस्ट पता चल जाए कि क्वेश्चनर का इस्तेमाल किस तरह से, क्योंकि ये इतना सिंपल और बेसिक टूल है कि आप सबको पता होना चाहिए. सो इसलिए आई एम स्किपिंग द इंटरव्यू पार्ट. आई हैवंट गॉन इनटू द डिटेल्स ऑफ इट, बट क्वेश्चनर के बारे में मैंने आपको कुछ चीज़ें बता दी. या so now you can make at least the basics. I'll share some specimens with you as well of a questionnaire, because I'm teaching another class. They are probably in their third semester, and we have discussed questionnaire in very detail with them. So since you haven't probably studied questionnaire in any of the semester, or have you? So you do not have field research.
हमारा एक टॉपिक था
randomly जो है friends भेज देते हैं research.
But now at least you are aware of the working process of how do you make one. How do you make one? Okay, so collection of data is done. So see, I mean you distributed your questionnaire to 150 participants and you have collected data. So the data is with you now. What is the next step? जी analysis. नहीं अभी conclusion. Analysis. So, data analysis. Data analysis. So again, I skipping the technicalities. The very simplified version of data analysis is you need to first of all tabulate. Do what? Tabulate. Tabulate means you count the number of responses against each of the answers of your QIs and then make a table probably. For example, like this. Questionnaire item numbers, for example 1, 2, 3, 4, and here you mention scale. Okay, so for example agree, disagree, no opinion. So you count that for out of 150, how many of them against questionnaire item number 1 said agree, and you write it here. Say for example 70 participants said agree, 30 disagreed, and 50 had no. So you do that for all close-ended questionnaires, so that you have numbers with you. Yeah. Abhi you not analyzing, rather you are synthesizing. You are gathering, pulling all the information in. Abhi to tabulate kar rahe hain aap usko. And sometimes this tabulation is automatically done. If you are familiar with Google Docs, are you?
Yes, sir.
Even if you not try familiarizing yourself with Google Docs. Google Forms, sorry. Google Forms.
सर यहाँ वो आएगा
ठीक है वो आएगा. So use Google Forms. Google Forms helps you prepare questionnaire, distribute questionnaire, and tabulate questionnaire responses automatically. It saves a lot of time. So if you manually distribute questionnaires, then you have to count number of responses individually. Whereas Google Form, if you give the link to someone, they respond to the questionnaire items and data gets tabulated automatically. So it's not hard. I mean, if you just play with it for like 10-15 minutes, you will be familiar with all the options available in Google Forms.
सबने WhatsApp स्टेटस पे तो लगाया होता है, फ्रेंड्स का भी 4 ऑप्शन होते हैं.
Another tool, another very reliable tool is SurveyMonkey. Have you heard of it?
Yes, sir.
No? SurveyMonkey.com. It does the same thing.
It's a monkey.
Yes. Google Forms and SurveyMonkey. So SurveyMonkey is again another tool that people rely upon in order to electronically make questionnaires and distribute it. I would encourage that at some point, I mean, just you know, play with these tools and acquaint yourself with the different functionalities available. So that done. So say you have collected all the responses. So the next stage is to visualize your first before even visualizing, you have to apply certain statistical procedures. Do what? Statistical procedures. For example, like average, mean, median, those simple statistical steps you have to apply in order to, you know, give a more synthesized version of the data that you have tabulated already. So for example, 70% is what of 150 in terms of percentage. So you will give that. So percentages be percentage, average, or whatever is suitable or whatever is intended in that research. So after having done that, you write down that this was the content of questionnaire item number 1 and this is the percentage of individuals who agreed or disagreed with that statement. So this is mere analysis. अभी तक आपने क्या किया, डाटा को कलेक्ट किया, टैबुलेट किया, स्टैटिस्टिकल प्रोसीजर अप्लाई किए हैं और एनालाइज किया. अभी तक आपने उसको इंटरप्रेट नहीं किया. ठीक है? और एक और स्टेज भी है, उसको कहते हैं विजुअलाइज. How do we visualize? We make charts and graphs. For example, pie chart. So this for example. So ये agree है, ये disagree है, ये no opinion है. So जितना जितना होगा, accordingly you will give the different colors and all these options are available. You can manually draw them, or even in the Google in the Word form there is option available to draw these automatically.
So wording से भी ये सब कुछ होता है.
Yeah, you can do. यही तो मैं बता रहा हूँ कि आपके पास मैनुअली ड्रा करने की जरूरत नहीं है. वर्ड में आपके पास ऑप्शन है, you can insert pie charts. So there is quite a few options available. You can make these sort of graphs as line graphs.
Yes.
You bar graph.
Percentage बता देते हैं.
Yeah, these are bar graphs and then line graph. Quite a few options available. This is what?
Visualization.
Visual representation of data. Visual representation of rather data analysis. The next stage is interpretation. Bas kare?
Yes, sir.
We're just winding it up. So next stage is interpretation, so that you could move towards your findings. Okay? Findings. And you have done the analysis, the next stage is what are your contributions? What has that data, what has that data led you towards? How you have contributed? What are the outcomes? What are the answers of your RQs? Yeah? So at this stage, you now go back to your RQs and based upon your analysis, you share the findings that questionnaire RQ number 1 was this and questionnaire item number 7, 12 and 19 were related to RQ number 1 and the percentages of data acquired from the responses of sample makes us believe that and whatever those findings are. So for example, if it's 70%, so majority of the people or majority of the participants agree that the quality of education in the schools of Jhang is satisfactory. So 70 shows majority. So now it's up to you how you use your language abilities to incorporate all those descriptions. So in finding section, basically it's a more concrete version of what you have found out in your analysis.
Sir, output.
Output, yeah. And then the very last thing is conclusion. Conclusion. So what is conclusion? Conclusion is again like a sort of takeaway material. In conclusion you mention what solid contributions you have made, or even sometimes you mention what are the future research possibilities. Since you have now become an expert in that field after spending so much time on one topic, now you are in a position to recommend that what future researchers should be doing on that area. You also mention some of the limitations of your research, that I started with this aim but I could not accomplish A, B and C. Reasons can be multiple. One reason can be lack of time, lack of resources, lack of expertise, access to the participants or whatever. So as a researcher, it's your responsibility to be honest, and this is the stage to express those aspects very briefly in the conclusion. So conclusion is one, you mention your contribution that you have made for the field, very pithy and precise and concise contribution that you have made. Then limitations and future research possibilities. Recommendations. So that is it. And then obviously references and citation and appendices are there.